think we'll go ahead and get started with our Economic Development Project Team meeting today. So I'll call this meeting to order. Commissioner Robbins, thanks for standing in for Commissioner Asasi, and I'll go ahead and chair this meeting in her absence. So first item before us is approval of our minutes, and these are the minutes from our last meeting that occurred on August 13th. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support. All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any questions or comments about the minutes?
No, ma'am.
All right, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, so Commissioners, we have two discussion items today, and then our typical verbal update from our Development Center. So we'll get started with the first one, and I'm assuming, Mr. Nero, are you going to kick this one off, the update on the Third Ward African American Cultural Tour? Oh, Asante is. Mr. Asante Kane, I'll have you come up and walk us through this item.
Thank you. I'm here with George Barrett from the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives.
Yes, welcome, by the way. Good to see you.
He'll be a co-presenter. As you know, the City of Grand Rapids is committed to enhancing community spaces. And to do that, we do that because we want to reflect the narratives and histories of our residents. Hold on one moment to get this presentation up. So the City of Grand Rapids is committed to enhancing community spaces to reflect the diverse narratives and histories of our residents. As you go about and you walk around Grand Rapids, you are reminded of the history of Grand Rapids. But we would like to enhance that through this Third Ward African American Cultural Tour. You know, when you go to some of the cities you see there on the right-hand side, when you go to Philadelphia and learn about the birth of our nation, when you go to Detroit to learn about Motown, a number of places on there, you know, those are reasons why people go to those cities. People go to Detroit to learn about Motown. People go to South Carolina cities to learn about the culture there. And we'd like to do the same thing with the Third Ward Cultural Tour. That's an opportunity to support local economies and tourism. It's an opportunity to support local businesses and artisans, and also a way to preserve historical understandings for future generations. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Baird, who'll talk a little bit more about the Third Ward African American Cultural Tour.
Howdy. What we really want to do here is to tell stories. We're storytellers, and we want people who come into our city to be able to reflect on those same stories. The African American culture here, I mean, the museum's been open 10 years now, so we've got a good following for people who are coming here for cultural and artistic uplifting. It's an amazing set of stories that we have. We've already done a lot of the work documenting some of the people here in Grand Rapids, and we've also been able to target different people, places, and events that would be on a national scale, things to talk about. The platform that we are thinking about doing comes in a couple different ways. That's to have little kiosks, different places that are inside that people can kind of click and point, and then they would get different images or different audio up telling them about that particular place. Other places would have a simple QR code, maybe on the side of their building, on the sidewalk, where people could scan it at their leisure and get information up on their phone. So those are the things that we're looking for. You see the list here of notable people from Grand Rapids. Right now, what we're doing is trying to get a filtering of basically who's in and who's not, to have a representative group of people, but also have room to build in the future for other people to go on into the historical tour. We just completed our own cultural tour, where we went to Charles Wright Museum in Detroit. We went to the Charles Wilson or August Wilson Museum in Pittsburgh, the National in DC, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And one of the things that we found out was that in a lot of these places, they're not telling our story. When we went to the Charles Wright Museum, they had a wall of black mayors, all the black mayors. They didn't have Lyman Parks on there. When we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we were looking for Al Green's, something on Al Green. Wasn't there. We went to the National Museum, and they had like, in the whole boxing wing, they had like a 3-second clip of Floyd Mayweather. That's all they had. So even with these other museums out there in the country, they're not telling our story. So we want to be that person to tell a story. We want to be the people to disseminate the information and get it to the general public. And I think the stories are definitely ones that need to be told. And even as people come into our gallery and to our museum from Detroit and from other places, they always say, "Oh, I didn't know Al Green was from here," or "I didn't know Floyd Mayweather was from here." And so we know we'll have already built-in tourists coming into Grand Rapids. And like I said, the tour itself, we're still working out the details on it, but we're very close to doing that too.
I got it. So what you see here is the proposed budget from the Grand Rapids African American Museum, a total $177,000 there. And I'd also like to talk about some other potential partners with it. So obviously the city providing initial funding through the Third Ward Equity Fund, the Grand Rapids African American Archives and Museum, which would be locating the sites to promote, providing markers, providing stories, videos, and documents, pictures, images of this important history of Grand Rapids, and also these cultural art pieces. I just want to clarify the primary mode of this would be online through a phone app, but there would be opportunity to have physical things such as markers and maybe, spaces in particular, places that will tell about more about the story of the city of Grand Rapids. And then also we're going to have Experience GR hosting these materials electronically and promotion of the tour. So the outcomes are increased community engagement, enhanced cultural and economic tourism in Grand Rapids, in the region, in the Third Ward, most importantly, a strengthened local identity where we're preserving our heritage, this opportunity to engage with new artists, artists in our community, artists outside of our community, where Grand Rapids can serve as a platform for them to do their art. If you go down Jefferson, it's in Southtown, not so much the Third Ward, but if you go down Jefferson and you pass Raspberry Field, African Americans played baseball there. The Negro League players played there, and that's an opportunity maybe for someone to dress up like famous Negro League baseball players from Grand Rapids, and if you have someone who's innovative, that might be an opportunity again for local people to make some money and enjoy some economic success. And also, this is a platform suitable for other cultural and economic tours. It doesn't just have to stop in the Third Ward. It doesn't just have to stop with African Americans. There's lots of stories that can be told here in Grand Rapids, and this would be a platform that could be duplicated with other efforts. Here you also see a quote from Experience GR on their piece. That's the hosting of video, images, and text, along with the mobile and web app. There is a little bit of duplication between the two proposals, but I believe that I know we'll be able to get below the current budget of $250,000 for this Third Ward Cultural Tour. Here you see a timeline. October, November, Experience GR is going to give a general update on some of their work. In the fiscal committee, after that, we'll bring that contract from Experience GR, their annual contract, and I'll also bring forward a contract to partner with the African American Museum about their particular work. November and February, initial cultural stops confirmed and text for those locations confirmed. As Mr. Baird said, there is a lot of that information history that he already has, but we'll also have some time to confirm where these physical markers are going to go and recording of audio video components for the digital components. Beta testing in March, and then April, physical markers to be installed, and we'll go live with Third Ward African American Cultural Tour. With that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kane. So I don't have any questions. I appreciate this update. I know I've been kept abreast of this work that's being done, and I'm glad to see some more detail since the last time that we met. George, I really appreciate your leadership, all your work on this, along with all of our community partners, city staff, and then obviously our third ward commissioners, Commissioner Perdue and Commissioner Goy, who've been actively involved in this. And so appreciate the timeline and now a better sense of the budget. So with that, maybe I'll start down here with Commissioner Perdue. Any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. Also excited to see this move forward, and happy to have you back in front of us today. I would like to hear a little bit more about some of your targets, particularly around the number of sites. How many sites and markers do you anticipate? And then I'll give my follow-up question after that.
In the first year, we've been talking about 50 digital sites, along with 25 physical locations and markers in the first year.
Okay. You say in the first year, so talk about subsequent years. Is there a plan for after year one, or is?
Yeah, I think we need to understand what it's going to cost to maintain the electronic piece. This is not a one-year project. We want to see the third ward thrive, and having an ongoing product would help with that. So we haven't worked out how many would be added per year. I think what we have talked about is there is probably an ability for it to be saturated. I mean, there are thousands of stories, but don't know how useful it would be if there's thousands of stories in this particular component. But we would find ways to add more sites year after year.
Mayor.
Go ahead, City Manager.
Commissioner, so it would be helpful for Mr. Bayer to also confirm the number of sites he thinks, as our partner, that he's able to up on the first year. But I think this brings up a point to your question about future years. Right now, this is, I think, a demonstration program, and it's out of the Third Ward Equity Fund. And so for sustaining it beyond the initial sites, we would need to be thinking about more long-term, should the initial year be successful, and how to expand it and how to support that. So I think those are decisions that we will have to make here at the dais with the commission support.
Do we have to be restricted to the CIA? CAI zones? No, that's what I was wondering. If you take the whole third ward, there are plenty of spots that we could use. We were trying to keep them in those targeted areas. But if we break out of that, there's no reason why we couldn't add, at least 20 per year for the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think given that, the idea that this first year is a demo year, and thinking about the need to really secure more sustainable funding to kind of realize the full vision, I wonder in this first year if there should be a greater focus on the physical sites, right? Because those are going to stay, those are going to preserve. I'm hearing you say that the cost of the online maintenance is very uncertain. And I think part of what we talked about when this idea originally came up is how do we mark physically the history, the enrichment of the Third Ward, people, places, cultural places. And I love the idea of a digital component because it is more accessible. But the other part of this was how do we get people out, walking in our district, overlapping it with the CIA so that there's a benefit to the local businesses. And so for those reasons, I wonder about the thinking of a prioritization of digital versus physical sites, particularly in that first year. So that's something that I think is worth discussing. I'm curious if any of my colleagues have any thoughts on that. And then the follow-up I have is any plans on, as you kind of select those sites, those approximately 75 sites in the first year. What kind of plans for community? Will there be any community feedback opportunities around what those final selections will be?
Yeah, I'll invite George back up to talk more about that. Definitely, all that stuff can be negotiated and figured out, but I'll let George speak on that.
No, that's always been our plan to have community-based decisions. We took some of the ones that are not in question, put them into this first presentation. But even in our research for these folks, we've come up with a bunch of other ones, places where there were businesses, people who aren't here in the area anymore, their families aren't here in the area anymore, but they still made an impact in some particular time frame in the past. And so we'll be going through probably, I would say, a 3-tier screening process. And even the ones that, don't get into the top echelon, will still have the digital component. You may not get a marker in front of your house, but, you might have a digital explanation of what your family did on the digital side of the component. So, but in order to do that, we always wanted to go through the community. And so we'll probably have a couple open sessions for community people to come in, speak their piece. I mean, I keep going back to this bus trip we went on. We went to these museums, but it was a trip that was really the best thing because people would come up and they would tell us stories. There's just so much out there. And so, matter of fact, a few people had even volunteered to be on a committee to do just that. And we've got a list of people that have already come to us and said, I'd like to be on a committee to choose who goes into the tour. So yes, we'll be doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robbins, any final questions before we button this up and move to the next item?
Yeah, just a quick question and a comment. First of all, thanks for being here. I think this is a very exciting idea, and I really resonate what you say too about, I think our city has a lot of rich history and some really cool stories to share that if left to the state don't always get told, because I think the focus is much more on the east side of the state, and I always think that that's such a shame just because we don't always get a chance to tell our own history. So thanks for that. And then kind of a question too, vaguely it sort of almost reminds me of the Pulaski Days parade and events that take place on the west side as kind of a similar cultural heritage type experience for residents. So I'm curious too, I know with that organization, they do a lot of fundraising events, they do a golf outing to kind of help supplement some of the funding that their organization's able to make throughout those events. So would that ever be part of the proposal too, doing some sort of, fundraising or what would the cost be to participate in some sort of tour? And could that maybe help, make the project more sustainable long-term too with some of those funding pieces? So that just kind of came to mind and was curious if any of that's been considered.
If I may, I think this cultural tour was kind of a vision of their work commissioners, including former Commissioner Moody, as well as State Rep Grant. And we kind of pitched the vision and asked for folks who would step up and help design it. So Grandma came, Experience GR, and others. So I think maybe the difference is that this isn't kind of a local nonprofit or cultural organization putting on something. So I think that might be a little bit out of the scope of what we have at least asked at this point.
Sure.
But I do think, I wonder for sustainability, I see where you're going. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I recognize there's differences. One's more of an event focused, whereas this is more of an experience where people are coming to take part in it. But I do think that at least the Pulaski Days organization has done a really good job of helping make that whole experience for people sustainable through some of their fundraising and having some very small costs to visit some of the halls and some of the sites that are part of that too. So was just curious if that's ever been considered, but. Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, it's a great question, and what I envision will happen, and who knows, the things evolve in ways that sometimes at the beginning we don't necessarily even imagine. But my guess is that once we begin this process and start to move, there will be tremendous opportunity that comes up to expand and grow and think more creatively and identify other aspects that can be added down the road. And so, I think the hardest step is often the first step, and then, with energy and people coming together, I think this will really blossom in the years to come. And so I expect that potentially could be something that happens down the road, but right now we're really focused on how do we at least get this initial piece, this initial phase started. And I think this is a good start based on the conversations I've had with folks over the last several months.
Thank you.
And also, I was going to say, there is a component that we talked about where businesses come into it. And that might be the option to have businesses come into it if there's a booklet or something to sell ad space. That could be a solution to that problem there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I will say my thanks again to our Third Ward commissioners, and I know Representative Grant has talked to me about this as well, and her leadership, and Commissioner Moody, Commissioner Perdue, thanks for reminding me that this was part of his brainchild all those years ago. And then city manager's been involved with other city staff. Asante, thank you for your work on this. And I'll look forward to seeing it move forward. So thank you so much. All right, with that, we'll go to the next item on our agenda today, and this is an overview of the Fulton and Market Transformational Brownfield Plan. We'll turn this over to Ms. Raniero from our Economic Development Department. We do have partners here from F&M who will also present. This is a project several years in the making, and lots of work leading up to this point, both with our economic development team as well as MEDC. They've already presented and provided a preview to our Brownfield Authority, and this is the next step before it will come back before us for a public hearing and move through the process to eventually end up on the agenda, hopefully at the MSF board sometime early next year. So with that, Ms. Raniero, why don't you kick us off on this item?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yes, you hit some of the high points there for me. I just want to call out Brad Thomas from Progressive and Joe Augustinelli from Michigan Growth Advisors, who intend to give you more meat and potatoes from a project perspective. What I wanted to do is just take one slide and give you an overview refresher, if you will, on the Transformational Brownfield Plan. And the act itself, giving us the authority to even consider this. So I want to call your attention to mainly the two ends of the slide, the left and the right. So on the right side, all the way over, I will header this next time I do this, but this is the column, or the column on the far right dedicated to transformational brownfield plans. And what you have in the middle there is traditional brownfield plans. And then all the way to the left, I'm going to draw your attention to the timeline of said act. So this is initiated in the state of Michigan in 2017. It's been amended a couple of times, ultimately provides enhanced incentives on top of our traditional brownfield tax increment financing for projects that are considered transformational. And I wanted to go through some of the eligibility, the eligible activity or cost, and then also the revenue streams that just make this a little bit different than what we traditionally see under Act 381 in a traditional brownfield program or project, excuse me. So the only other thing I want to say on the timeline piece there is that this is meant to sunset in 2017, or if the caps are exhausted. And so that's really, I think that's an important point just to be aware of, that this is not an endless pot of money. And the state is working to geographically distribute transformational brownfield plans across the state. Just to give you an example of that geographic distribution, about a third of the bucket is dedicated to going to communities smaller than 225,000. In Grand Rapids, we are eligible for a couple of different points here on a project like you're going to see. The qualifier for the program is what we traditionally see as far as eligibility. You have to be, contaminated or facility functionally obsolete or blighted property, including historic and now housing eligibility. And you also have to be transformational. There's a threshold of $100 million minimum in private investment. And Also, based on our population size, the scope needs to have included or integrate a combination of retail, office, residential, or hotel uses. And also based on our size, it also has to be on a previously developed property within a mixed-use and walkable area. So just some of the attributes that go along with the act there. As far as costs, what you're going to see is our traditional eligible activities, demo, lead and asbestos abatement, infrastructure, site prep, but you're also going to see hard costs that are eligible. So all vertical construction, renovation, restoration costs associated, again, to the hard costs are eligible activities under the act. The final two rows there dedicated to taxes captured and tax exemption row are really what make up the 5 revenue streams. So the revenue stream that we're most familiar with under Brownfield is property tax values, right? So property tax, both at the state and local level, can be contemplated. And with a transformational Brownfield plan, we have 4 additional revenue streams. One is construction costs related to labor and materials. 2 are income tax capture revenues. 3 are withholding tax capture revenues. And the fourth one that's new, so for a total of 5, but the fourth one that is new is sales and use tax capture. From a status perspective, I also wanted to say that the Economic Development Office received an application for this project and has been working closely with the development team to evaluate that proposal. Like the mayor suggested, we have put this in front of our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority as well for an informational presentation, and I look forward to I would like to invite Brad and Joe up to get more into the meat and potatoes of the project scope, unless there's any questions that stand out on statutorily related that I could be helpful with.
Great. I don't have any, having been actively involved with
Sure.
this legislation and getting it passed, I'm quite familiar with it. Commissioners, any additional questions related to this?
I have a question for
Yeah.
clarity. That's
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Just because I'm not sure, I'm sure it's here somewhere, but can you point me to, I think the project estimated investment is $738.5 million. So what's the target contribution from transformational brownfield of all the incentives?
Well, I think we're going to get to that. I think
Proposal.
Yes. It's in the slides, right?
It is,
So we're gonna
okay.
so this is just any questions about the legislation and the parameters with the transformational brownfield. And then, is that right? You wanted to see if we had any
Yes.
questions about this?
Yes.
And then I think that will
Sorry
be
for
answered as we
skipping
go.
But it
ahead.
is included, Commissioner.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll be patient.
All right, good?
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bliss, Manager Washington, and Commissioners. I'm Brad Thomas. I'm a principal with Progressive Companies. Here today with my colleague Joe Augustinelli. Joe will introduce himself when he gets up here. We're going to tag team on our little presentation, and maybe get us up here and running, Joe. Was it next slide? Looks like it's the next slide.
Yeah, yep, I think it's all together in one.
Oh, all right, here we go.
Yep.
Now I screwed it up. Let's do this. Hopefully. All
There
right.
we go. All right. We have a presentation for you today. And so
Thank you. We like presentations.
wonderful. So we'll walk you through that, and then happy to answer any questions when
Great,
we're done.
thanks.
Again, I'm Brad Thomas. I've had the privilege of working on this property and the neighborhood, if you will, all the way from Fulton down to Wealthy over the last 5 or so years, focusing specifically on the Fulton and Market site. The last couple of years, we've had a much more detailed focus. That's what we're going to walk through today. Site, as you're likely most familiar with, bounded on the west by the Grand River, the north Fulton Street, east Weston, and south all the way to the US 131 highway. Consists currently of 10 individual parcels, approximately 6.8 acres in size. It is zoned city center and part of the Unlimited Height District, and is also part of the Grand River Overlay District from a zoning perspective. Currently, surface parking and vacant lot, and clearly, I think most would agree, not the highest and best use for this parcel of land on our riverfront. And then when we talk about what what could be. This is where we get kind of excited. We cast this vision of something that can be vibrant mixed-use development, bringing workers and employees and shoppers and visitors to our community, really creating great activity and vibrancy in what is our growing sports and entertainment district. Part of an extension of what has been a grand vision to redevelop one of the largest active riverfront projects in the country. A little bit of background. I mentioned earlier, the work that you're seeing and the outcome from this planning is really a build on prior work that's been done previous to this work. Building on the GR Forward plan, the City of Grand Rapids Master Plan, the River for All planning, and then the image you're seeing is an excerpt from the work that Grand Action 2.0 commissioned to look at the riverfront properties of 31 acres stretching all the way from Fulton, which is the left side of this image, down to Wealthy, which is the right side of this image, and really looking at all that riverfront property. It was the outcome of this work that identified 201 Market, the city's former public works facility, as a location for the Acrisure Amphitheater, and also contemplated the work we're going to talk about, and that is at the Fulton and Market corner in this active, vibrant, mixed-use development. Another couple of important elements that came out of this planning work is really the heavy focus on the river's edge. Did a lot of work recognizing, and again, if we think about where this is at on a river, we think about the river restoration. The active part of the rapids really ends at Fulton Street. So as we think about this property, this is where the river begins to still again. And so as we were thinking about the planning, we were looking not just at how we might think about the development from the land side, but also thinking about it from the water's edge as well. As you see in this planning master plan, the river's edge was an important focus, looking at how do we activate that river's edge, connect to the trail system. So again, that was all background work as we began to lead into the Fulton and Market site planning. Ultimately, the vision that's being communicated is this transformation of what is currently over 6 acres of parking into this vibrant waterfront development. A little bit of background just to remind those that may or maybe share with those that weren't previously aware. The project that we're talking about today really is a portion of a much larger transformational project that was initially envisioned collectively. And it included the soccer stadium and its adjacent mixed-use development, the amphitheater and its adjacent mixed-use development, together with the Fulton Market site. In part for administrative reasons on the part of MEDC, as well as the timing of the Grand Action projects, we've separated out, and the Grand Action projects have moved forward independently and have recently received MSF board approval. And we're really here today to talk about the Fulton and Market sites. But again, thinking about transformative impact, really, when we think about these things collectively, it's pretty exciting for our city. A little bit of context for you just with respect to the site itself. Again, when we look at where it's located on the Grand River, it's sort of at this elbow that creates these unique opportunities from a views up and down the river, both to the site as well as from the site. Also on the south, it's on the edge of the US 131 freeway. Of course, that has sort of a two-sided coin. On one hand, it creates great visibility into the site. So as you think about how we're positioning buildings, the visibility of those buildings from the highway, the number of people going by, certainly an asset. On the other side, we also know that there's a fair amount of noise that comes from the highway. So how we think about organizing the buildings on the site to buffer, if you will, that noise for the uses internal to the site. Where the property is located relative to the Van Andel Arena, as well as a new Acrisure Amphitheater, again, right on this sort of nexus, if you will, of what is this emerging sports and entertainment district. So the uses that go into this property really building on the activity that's already generated related to those venues and uses. Looking at, again, Van Andel Arena, thinking about Weston Street and the extension of Weston Street and an opportunity to, and again, River for All was a lot about creating views to the river, access to the river mid-block, creating, these corridors. And really, as you see the planning, it was something that emerged pretty early in terms of how can we capitalize on that extension of Weston. Of course, it also is a connector to our skywalk system. And so again, as we began the planning for the site, side and the buildings on it, how does it connect and leverage that skywalk as well? And of course, last but certainly not least is the river's edge itself, recognizing the role of this site in providing connectivity to the adjacent trails systems to the south, all the way down to the Oxford Trail system, and ultimately out to the county boundary between Ottawa and Kent, and ultimately to Lake Michigan, and then to the east out towards Lowell, creating some nearly 100 miles of trail system. Ultimately, the planning that's emerged is this image that's in front of you on the southern portion of the site. The site's really bifurcated, as I mentioned earlier, by this extension of Weston, creating a promenade, views, and access down to the river's edge mid-block. The southern portion of the site consists of an office tower, 420,000 square feet of office space built on top of a parking structure. That parking structure at the ground floor along Market, as well as along the edges of the promenade, will have active uses and retail shops and restaurants. On the northern side of the promenade, we have another podium. This podium too contains parking, but is lined around the edges with housing. And then on top of that podium sits two towers, one of which consists of apartments, close to, in total, 595 apartment units, as well as a hotel with 130 keys and condominiums atop that. In total, parking between the two podiums of about 2,500 spaces. Again, when we think about that parking, and again, we think about the location, again, particularly the parking connected to the office use, office user by day, transit use, amphitheater, arena, and other evening uses on evenings and weekends as well. When we talk about the shared space or common spaces, again, sort of highlighting the promenade itself and its adjacent uses, as well as the river's edge. And then there's additional amenity spaces on top of the parking structures dedicated to the office, residential, and hotel users. Moving from a two-dimensional to three-dimensional, just to help, again, provide perspective. In this case, looking from the river to the east with the office tower on the right-hand side. Again, you see the parking with the office tower atop that, as well as promenade and the retail shops along the edges, along the riverfront, and then the residential and hotel tower on the left side of this image. From the east looking west, you see the connections to the skywalk system, and again, how we anticipate this extension of Weston, creating this great corridor through to the river. And again, representing our active, vibrant riverfront development. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel, talk a little bit about economic impact.
Thanks, Brad. Hello, Commissioners, Mayor. Joe Augustinelli. I'm with Michigan Growth Advisors. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Miller Johnson and focused on economic development incentives. And we've been leading the transformational brownfield, I'll call it journey, over the last 2.5 years. So as Brad mentioned, to achieve this vision, the total investment on the project is just shy of $800 million. Commissioner, you flagged that $750 million number earlier. We actually had an updated number from our original file. So this is the current accurate budget number. Some of the drivers on cost and headwinds that make this development challenging, first and foremost, is the site itself was formerly part of the Grand River. So the river flowed through. Actually, there was an island in the site with the river flowing through the middle of it, which creates that was filled in over time to achieve more land in the city. Doing that creates a frankly horrible building pad to build something tall and heavy on top of. So there's some very, very significant underground geotechnical work that needs to happen just to get to the surface of the site before we talk about going vertical. And there's a reason you haven't seen high-rise development happen over the last 20 years is the cost of construction on a per square foot basis is several orders of magnitude higher than a lot of what we've seen developed in the city, in those 3 to 7 story buildings that are typically wood frame, at least for part of it. So those costs are are big and are a key driver in the project. But with that vision, we'll be able to bring about 1,900 new jobs to the site. As Brad mentioned, 671 residential units, 130 hotel keys. But none of that's possible without very significant incentive support due to the cost drivers of the project as compared to the revenue that would be generated by it. So two pieces, picking up on what Sarah was describing earlier, what I'll call new revenue streams generated by the transformational brownfield that are different than typical projects that you would see is about $300 million. That's capture of state income tax withholding of people living and working in the development. That is a capture of the sales tax generated by businesses operating within the development. That's the capture of the state income tax withholding of construction workers working actively on the site to build the development. And then there's a sales tax exemption on construction materials are the 5 revenue streams there. Then the more traditional real estate tax increment financing, this would be the incentive that you would see on pretty much any major development that's coming through the city, major and minor. This is the capture of the new real estate taxes that are generated above and beyond what's there today on the surface parking lot. All of that is what allows us to transform a just shy of 7-acre vacant surface parking lot into 1.2 million square feet of dense, vibrant, exciting new development in our downtown. Excuse me. Key focus areas for the development team as we've been approaching this. First and foremost is how do we contemplate affordable housing as part of the development plan. So as we were initially modeling the project, we were thinking, okay, what could we do if we developed affordable housing within the footprint here? And going back to the economics of developing at this scale on this particular piece of real estate that has really challenging geotechnical issues, the economics of the project allow for about 15 units to be developed on site, affordable units to be developed on site if they were part of the development. So that made us take a step back and say, well, is there a way that we could do more? And what we're proposing to do here is instead of developing affordable units on site, we can build about 5.6 times more units for the same expense to the project if we were to develop them off-site through a contribution to the city's affordable housing fund. So that what we're proposing is to capture a percentage of the transformational brownfield revenue associated with the residential development, the residential units in the development over a 20-year period, which is the life of the TBP revenue stream. And that would represent about an $8.5 million contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. Second, as Brad mentioned, we're construction activity as we move towards engaging with general contractors and then those folks engaging with their subcontractor pool. The team is committed to encouraging isn't the right word, requiring our general contractors to reach out to to minority-owned, women-owned, micro-local-owned business enterprises as part of the construction project. And the goal that the team's established is $31 million of contracting with those groups. A couple other points of focus. We pulled out the Grand River Equity Framework that has been prepared over the past couple of years and kind of looked at some of its goals and how we're helping achieve some of those, again, focused on equitable economic impact, making the river accessible. As you know right now, if you walk by that site, if you were on the site, you wouldn't even know that the river's there with the fencing and the trees that are there. So opening up the shoreline to public use, incorporating the trail system throughout invites the public in and through and onto the site. And then again, focused on a healthy river and community. So through reintroduction of native plants, added tree canopy, and green stormwater infrastructure being designed into the project. And again, all of this is to achieve a transformational development that brings workers, residents, shoppers, visitors all into our downtown within what we think is a growing sports and entertainment district. Couple key points to highlight there. We see this as really a key connection point for businesses, hotels, and visitors to sports and entertainment opportunities. Access to the river and visibility into the site, and access not just from the land side into the river, but from the river into the site, we see as an exciting opportunity. Again, extending the Riverwalk to the south and connecting into adjacent neighborhoods, and then ultimately into the trail systems that go for miles in either direction. And lots of opportunity for new retail and restaurants, inviting the public to engage with the site and the river. And again, taking a vacant surface parking lot and putting a 1.2 million square feet of development on it, I think is the definition of transformation. And we're excited about that opportunity to create density on a really underutilized prominent site. It adds 670 new housing units. We have a housing shortage in the community at all price points, and I think adding market rate units will certainly help with the shortage. That a plurality of the shortage is at the sort of market rate price point, along with, at the same time, making a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund to help address multiple pieces of the affordability spectrum. Again, commitment to inclusion in the project, and nearly 4,400 construction jobs through the 3-year build cycle for the project, along with 1,900 new permanent jobs on the site. A couple more slides, and then we'll be happy to answer some questions. So we've been involved with a lot. Brad and I have been giving this presentation a lot to various community stakeholders, neighborhood groups, individuals who've reached out looking for more information. So today we've reached out and met with the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, Experience Grand Rapids, City and County Administration, Leadership, Grand Action, the Convention Arena Authority, DGRI, in the right place. And then focusing on more the neighborhood side, we've met with the Rapid. Brad will be at the Hartside Business Association next week, Wednesday, while I'm at the Brownfield Authority meeting on the 16th. We'll be meeting with Plaza Towers, Downtown Neighborhood Network, Hartside Neighborhood Association, and along with many elected officials, and there's quite a few meetings of individuals and groups that have reached out to us that we're still trying to align calendars to meet with. So we're happy to meet with any and all to hear feedback. And again, as this is in sort of master plan stage, we think we have a lot of opportunities still to listen to ideas and see how we can take what we think is a great vision and improve upon it. In terms of schedule, as Sarah mentioned, I think Sarah mentioned, we were at the Brownfield Authority at their 25th meeting of September for an initial presentation. We'll be back there next week, Wednesday, where the BRA will be considering a recommendation of approval to the City Commission. And then the 3 City Commission meetings will be are targeting the October 22nd meeting to set the public hearing, holding the public hearing on the 12th of November, and then consideration of approval on December 3rd. If that all happens, then we would be currently targeting the February Michigan Strategic Fund Board meeting, which would be the 4th Tuesday of the month. And then if all of that happens, we would then start to move in from sort of the conceptualization stage into final design and work towards construction start roughly this time next year. And that would be a phased construction that would roll into spring of 2026. And then these are very large buildings that are going to take a while to build, roughly 3 years per structure. So that would take us into fall of 2028, spring of 2029 for completion and occupancy. So that is our presentation, but we'd love to answer any questions that folks might have.
All right, thank you. I have a couple comments. I don't have any questions, probably because I've been so close to this throughout the last few years. I've had a number of folks talk to me about this, and I want to just make a couple comments, and you can correct me because you're the expert in this space and not me. Correct me if I'm wrong. One thing that I continue to remind folks, similar to our Brownfield Authority or Brownfield incentives, is that the city doesn't have a pot of money of, $400 and some million sitting aside, and we don't write a check. None of these incentives exist if no development occurs. These are all taxes that are captured based on the project moving forward. Right now, it's an asphalt parking lot, and the city is getting minimal tax revenue from that lot and that space. So again, I just like to remind people that this is capture that occurs if and when the project moves forward. The other thing, having worked on the transformational brownfield, it is meant to be different, and the intent is for projects such as this that are transformational, significant in scale and scope. You've seen this tool used multiple times in Detroit with significant positive impact on that city. And even though we've only approved a couple so far, as Sarah indicated, this isn't an endless pot. This is a capped amount based on size of city. But the incentive that's being considered is consistent with size of other incentives. If you look at other incentives in other cities that have received transformational brownfield, even the Factory Yards one, that's a $147 million project. The incentive for that is $103 million over the course of the project. So some people have talked to me about the size. I know the numbers are large. They're large because the size and scope of this project is significant. But if you look at percentage-wise, it's very consistent with other transformational brownfields. It's not unusual, but I do think the numbers are striking to some people. But the reality is, as you said, the cost to build this is much greater than some of our smaller scale projects for a whole host of reasons, and we're well aware of that. So I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. I do think that it is significant and is probably, if it moves forward, the largest private development in the city probably ever. And I was trying to think back to a larger project. Studio Park was, $140 million, I believe, when that was initially approved. Again, that captured a significant amount of incentives to move that project forward, and the DDA was very supportive of that. But nothing, in my opinion, that I can think of is at the scale or scope of this project. So those are some things I've talked to folks about over the last couple weeks after this became public at the last Brownfield meeting, and some of the conversations I've had and questions I've answered related to this project. So. All right, I'll turn to my colleagues, Commissioner Robbins and then Commissioner Perdue.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thanks for this presentation. It's been very informative. I too don't have any specific questions, I think, yet at this point, as we're still getting the information. But I did just want to touch on a few things, too. I appreciated the Ode to the River for All and the River Equity Framework piece that I know you all are being intentional about. I think a lot of the adjacent neighborhoods that are within the First Ward, too, have always had a very strong interest in how they see their neighborhoods fit into the connectivity with the river and all the activity that's going on there too. And so being able to lead with that, I think, and show that there is a lot of thought going into how we can incorporate them better into our city center, into our river, is really important. So just wanted to thank you for that. And I think that this project is thoughtful in a number of ways. And helps accomplish, kind of three different strategic priorities that the city has. I mean, first and foremost, maintaining a competitive business climate. I think not many cities can say that they have, large, companies wanting to still maintain their locations within a city. And so to know that a significant portion of this is office space, and there's interest from a tenant to be able to, have their employees working out of that location is really encouraging to me. I know that there's been talk too. Some of the studies have shown we have additional demand for hotels as well, and in talking about bringing some more entertainment facilities and amenities to the downtown area, I surely think that that's going to be a good fit to addressing some of that additional demand that we might see from those. And then lastly, too, just the housing piece. I think, as we've seen from the data and the studies that we've been presented, in order to really address housing and affordability holistically, we have to have housing at all price points. And I know I've received a couple questions about, why don't these contain affordable units or, restricted by a certain AMI percentage. But I appreciate what you mentioned too about the contribution to the Grand Rapids Affordable Housing Fund, and just understanding that, this project is expensive because of its location and the cost per, square foot that it takes to construct something of the scale. But knowing that those dollars will be able to stretch much further elsewhere and be able to help address, our affordable housing needs more meaningfully, if not included directly within this project, I think is a very thoughtful approach too. So I'm excited about this. I've heard really positive feedback from many of my constituents, and just look forward to hearing more information as it progresses. So thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Perdue?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for the presentation. I echo thanks of my colleagues. I do have a few questions that I don't think were specifically touched on, but I think are important to this conversation. I think when it comes to our transformational projects that we are seeing come before us and see being developed, there's a lot of excitement, but there's a lot of nervousness and a lot of questions about what does this mean for everyone in our city. And so I've been getting a mix of those responses from my constituents especially. So on the full-time job piece, you mentioned over 1,900 permanent ones will be, I don't know if there's numbers on these slides. Will come with this project, and I think over 4,000 construction jobs. For the permanent ones in particular, but construction as well, is there any commitment to hiring locally, and particularly for the full-time permanent ones, paying living wages? Can you talk about any commitments around job quality?
Yeah,
the jobs that are coming?
The job creation on the project is not ultimately controlled by the development team. That's anticipated job creation for future tenants of the development. So it'll be other businesses occupying and leasing space. So the development team just doesn't have any control over what other businesses do in the space that they're leasing. I can say that of the 1,900 jobs, 1,600 of those are anticipated to be within the office development portion. The average wage of the types of jobs that would be anticipated for the office user that we're talking with is certainly living wage and well above living wage. I got to be careful about how far I go with that answer, but I can say with confidence, yes, that 1,600 of the 1,900 will be living wage jobs. The balance of that, I don't know ultimately, because we don't know who those tenants are going to be. So that's probably the best answer I can give you on that.
Can I add to that, though, just to add some clarity? I think it's a great question. We do know, though, that one of the proposals is hotel, and we have a sense of, in comparison to, wages at our downtown hotels, that they tend to be living wage jobs or a little bit higher jobs, especially post-COVID. And could probably get some breakdown on that. And then the retail, my understanding is that there will be some intention putting to try to make sure that those retail spaces are locally owned businesses, and that we're being supportive, similar to some of the initial work that we did with Studio Park, trying to create those spaces for local ownership around the retail space. And so I think the goal is definitely that those will be good paying jobs, but ultimately kind of similar to when Studio Park happened with the retail spaces, it could be a mix of kind of
Sure.
mid-range or higher range
Sure.
restaurants, service, stuff like that.
And I'll just add, Mary, you brought up a great point. Yeah, we've been, having that conversation with DGRA about how do we, work with them and their sort of business attraction tools. This is a long ways down the road, right? We're talking about 2029 completion of these retail spaces. But absolutely, how can we engage with, local entrepreneurs who are looking to open up a new development? How can, the incentives that DGRI has, help them kind of get up and running? Yes, and from a planning level, we're a ways away from the execution level on that, but yes, for sure.
I'm glad we started going that direction because I was going to ask similarly on the operations side, are there any anticipated commitments around local diverse retailers or operators, or even when it comes to art and furnishing the hotel and the other kind of public spaces, what other commitments can be made in those areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. That one in particular, we haven't been asked yet, so we'll have to circle back with the team. We'll have to circle back with you on that one.
But can I just add one thing, just in case my two colleagues aren't familiar with some of the work that we've been doing with the DDA. DGRI, we do have a grant program for local women and minority-owned businesses, and we've used it multiple times in the past to support businesses downtown, and we can get you a list of those and the support. But typically will help offset the cost of rent for 2 years by 50%, or we'll give an outright grant. Some of those grants have been up to $50,000, and we work pretty closely with those local businesses, especially to try to get them in a good position to be successful, knowing that those first 2 years are so critical. And DDA is actively involved in this development and will come alongside. It's in the district, and it will be a priority for them.
Good. And one follow-up for you, Mayor. Having seen a lot of brownfields come through this body over time, do you have a sense of, have you seen any of them sunset after that 20 or 30-year period? And if so, particularly for the local tax capture, like the income tax capture, do those dollars then go into our general fund? And has there ever been any conversation around identifying how much additional dollars we're getting after that end and how we're utilizing those?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we can probably work on a report through economic development on that.
That'd be great.
So we do, another incentive tool that we used years ago that was in place when I was first elected was the REN zones. So Renaissance zones were kind of a super incentive, and a number of significant projects, especially in the downtown area, used that set of tools, including, what was the most recent one on the west side, the old school. Why is that blanking? And they're condos now. Anyway, my point is, I think we can go back and look over the last 30 years and say, okay, this was the incentive that was given, but after that incentive sunsetted, this is the property tax and the income tax that we're collecting. We could probably do that, and we could do it. Unless Sarah Jo, can you think of a more significant incentive? I'm thinking of the REN.
Yeah, REN zone would.
Yeah, I think the school off Broadway, right downtown here.
The school off Broadway.
Yep.
But I think we can pull that together. We did just.
No brownfields have ended in the.
Brownfields have ended. We did during COVID extend some of the brownfields for some of the projects, at least downtown. And then we made, when Corwell went in on North Monroe, there were some adjustments to our brownfield to support that project. But I think we can probably get that.
Yeah, I think that would
relatively
be really helpful,
easily.
especially for the public as we keep talking about tax capture. As we keep talking about tax capture, what that means, and be able to explicitly illustrate how much new dollars we're getting from this project.
So what I'm hearing is that that kind of analysis after the incentive period ends, and perhaps between our assessor's office and economic development, we may be able to do that, but probably more our assessor's office could more easily help us do that than just the economic development team. So let me look into that.
Yeah, and I think maybe DDA captures some of that too when the, I'll trust you can
Yeah,
capture.
certainly for downtown, but
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
throughout the city is
Yeah.
the question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you have something?
and if I may, Commissioner, one really important distinction that I want to make sure on that line of thought doesn't get missed here is the transformational brownfield program does not capture city income tax. So to the extent that this project causes new residents to move into the city, which we absolutely believe that it will, that's immediately new revenue to the city. And then we do have, and I don't have the number in front of me, we can certainly follow up, but the transformational brownfield plan itself does identify the taxable values at 30 years out when the real estate portion comes back onto the tax rolls. And it's obviously very large compared to the surface parking lot that's there today.
Yeah, and just a reminder for anyone who's listening, all city income tax goes into our general fund. Property tax is divided up, a portion of the property tax, a much smaller portion of it goes to city operations. The hotel excise tax would go to the county under the lodging tax. So there are different components and taxing jurisdictions that would capture different elements of the taxes once the project comes to an end. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any final questions or thoughts? All right. Well, I appreciate this presentation and all the work that has gone into it, and we'll work on getting some additional, I'd say, gathering some additional data and information so that we have all of that before us. But next steps is it will go to our Brownfield Authority on October 16th. We'll see what that body determines. And based on what their determination is, it will likely come before us to set a public hearing. We'll have a public hearing. We'll be able to hear additional feedback from community before it ultimately comes back to us for consideration. So, all right. Thank you both. I appreciate that. We'll move on then pretty quickly to our Development Center report. Let me pull that up. Hi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will keep it brief as I know we're running a little overtime today. I just wanted to give a brief update on the Development Center's progress. You've seen our report there in the agenda packet today, and I'm having a hard time getting it up here, but there we are. Most notable thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is as of the end of September, we have now seen the most construction value in the city of Grand Rapids ever. So 2019 was our previous milestone at $560 million. We are now currently at $573.6 million. So it's great to see that vibrancy, and just coming off this previous presentation, seeing that that's going to be continuing. Review timelines are keeping pretty stable. We're not seeing a lot of jump in the duration of that, although we are seeing a bit of a duration and just getting feedback from the consultants as we ask for additional information on our plans. And with that, if you have any questions on any of the projects in the report today, I'll be happy to answer them.
All right. Let me see. Commissioners, do you have any questions? It's good news. And we still have 3 months left to the year.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I was just asking, what does LUDS stand for in the?
Land use development. So that's essentially our site plan application.
LUDs.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
The infamous LUDs
That's right.
process. Surprised you haven't heard more developers complain about that, Commissioner.
I know, right?
Be prepared.
I've heard stories. I guess one thing I'm curious about is within the new housing units, that AMI breakdown, that's such a point of conversation. And we know we need units across all price points. And that is type of unit, right? Yeah, number of units, but really looking at kind of that price point. I don't know if that's a breakdown that you might be able to include in future updates.
So we don't collect data on affordability of the units as we're processing the permits, but I do know our other departments do collect that information. We can combine our data with theirs to put that report out there for you.
Thank you. It's great news.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we will close our Economic Development Project team. And Commissioners will be back in here at 2 o'clock, 20 minutes.